Good morning, everyone. Are we rolling? Oh, great. We'll call this meeting of the Community and Economic Development Committee to order at 9:01 on Thursday, August 1st. Oh, the turn of the month. We'll start off with Assembly Member introductions, and my name is Assembly Member Martinez. And
Scott Myers. Mark Littlefield.
Anna Brawley.
are there any members on the line with us?
Zach Johnson.
Randy Salt's here.
Thank you. Member Salt, Member Johnson.
Karen Braga.
Karen, thank you.
And you got Randy as well, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Randy. And Zach.
I'm here too, George. Zach Johnson.
We got Randy, Karen, and Zach. Excellent on the line with us. And Chair Constant called and said he would be possibly running late at all. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We'll go through our regular reports, but I just wanted to give an update on the agenda. Under new business, item B today, the presentation on child care sector innovation with Erin Baldwin Day has been canceled and called due to a scheduling conflict that arose early this morning. And so we'll reschedule that conversation. That'll give us a little more room for any of the discussions that may otherwise emerge from our presentation today. So with that note, let's turn it over to our office, the Office of Economic and Community Development, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Wilbur and lead the way, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got a lot of things going on in the Office of Economic and Community Development. I think I'll start with all of the departments as a group. We received our budget guidance from the administration last Friday. Our submissions are due next Wednesday. So we have been focused on that a lot. I think, so we've been working on that. That includes our operating and our capital for all of those. And so I know that the guidance included that the mayor wanted to find some time, I think beginning the week of the 13th, to meet with department heads. And I know that the Assembly has got a couple workshops and work sessions going on as it relates to the budget, but that's kind of where we are in all of our, so the department heads have been working with me to get their proposals together. I think at the moment, Mr. Chairman, without knowing completely what most of the activity and community development departments are probably going to be in the Public Works Department, and they're mostly going to be focused on M&O for facilities, fleet. So just as a little preview, and I think depending on how the administration wants to share that information, we'll continue. So that's a global piece. The other thing that I'm working on, and I think in working with Assembly Member Brawley, one of the things that we talked about last month was getting together a working group to look at review the site access ordinance. So I'm putting some folks together, and that will probably start in earnest in September. Getting some folks together. I know we want some representatives from the industry and some representatives from here. So that is on my list to do. So more to come on that. From all of economic and community development, that's kind of what I've got there. And if I could just go on to building services, development services, I don't know if Greg jumped in or not. Greg is doing interviews right now for the front counter, so that's why we've got, and speaking of development services and positions, so at the front counter out here, we are down 2 positions, so we're doing an interview right now. We're actively working to get those filled. HR has been very supportive of that, and I think the HR department and Mr. Falsey, as the head of Chief Administrative Services, has also been very supportive in coming up with some creative ways in which we can get folks in the door, advertising, things like that. So that's been very good. And over in development services, not only at the counter, but we also have some plan review staff. We've got 2 or 3 positions, and we haven't received any candidates for those. So we're working diligently to get those filled as well. So, and the development service is also going to be working on updating our Title 23, our code, and as part of that, we get a bunch of working groups together to review the code requirements for the 2024 IBC. So we asked to the Assembly members and members in the audience, if you know of some folks that are plumbers or electricians that are in the business. They are very helpful to form on our committees. You can turn your names over to Mr. Soule. It is not. So basically what we do is we give them the current code and the changes that we want to work. It's work, don't get me wrong, but basically what we'll do is we'll review the existing code, review the proposed changes that we want. The group will start meeting in I think October is when they start wanting to get those together. So it's going to depend on the number of
Sorry,
that do that. So that's going to be important. And I think the last thing I'll mention for development services is regarding valuation. I know that some assembly members are interested in this. We track our valuation by week compared to this week the previous year. And where we are compared to last year, this time of the year, is we're at about 114%, so about 114% over last year. We've got about $340 million in permit valuation coming in the door to date. So
Do you have that broke down between commercial and residential?
I do, but I don't have it with me, but I can certainly share it. Yeah.
I'd be interested to see that.
Yeah, we can get it down. And even by commercial, we keep the big chunks separate. So if you want to know what the biggest activities are, we can share that with you, Mr. Meyer. So,
Yeah, that'd be helpful as well. Any questions from any members about any of that thus far?
Lance, have you guys engaged Anchorage Home Builders with that?
For the request, yes.
Okay.
And I think AGC, reaching out to them, and even our inspectors, when they are out on, working with contractors, we ask them if they have folks that are interested. So absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lance, can I just go back to the hirings?
Yes.
Yeah, and just give us a sense of, I'm interested in the nexus between impact of work with respect to the public-facing impact and those positions, right? Is there an impact with when we don't have those positions, and what is the impact and the urgency to fill those roles?
So the impact is felt, and I'll let Greg talk to the magnitude of it, but basically the permit counter, that's activity where folks coming in the door to get permits, everything from a shed to replacing a roof to building a building. And then the plan review is in the back, where basically we get a set of plans and getting reviewed. Those. Obviously, there's third-party review that's available, so that provides some relief to folks, but I don't have the metrics to share with you sort of what the delay has been, but it does slow some things down. We also provide some overtime. And then I think in your audit committee report or the next assembly meeting, you will see the biannual audit that internal audit does. We do a survey of customers, those that come in for a permit. We send them out a survey and they respond and ask questions about the kind of service they got, the time that they waited by division, by the permit, by plan review, by right of way. So look forward to seeing that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, we can imagine that there would be that impact. We hear about it.
Yep.
Yeah. Little bro?
Yeah, just, I wonder if you could unpack a little more of the valuation. So I understand you're saying 114% over last year, so that's an increase of 14 percentage points. But is that permits that are completed, or is that buildings that are partially completed? Because I know we measure that as well. I guess I'm wondering, I'm trying to track that compared to what we've heard in the past, certificate of occupancy or completion of buildings or things like that. Like, how does that fit in? If you could explain a little more.
I cannot right now, but I can ask Development Services to help me understand what you're asking. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, maybe just a written explanation.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, Craig Lane, Planning Department. My understanding of what that valuation is it is someone puts in a permit for some structure. That's what that dollar figure is. It doesn't mean anything is finished. It just means we're going to do the changing. South Central is redoing the Ernie Turner Center to something. That's the valuation of the construction, and that's what shows up there.
Thanks.
Mr. Meyer?
So is that a value of today's dollar, or is it's adjusted over?
Great. You want to continue?
I think the only last thing I was going to mention, maybe Member Brawley is going to mention, if we had a meeting with Development Services and Planning, and Member Raleigh about how we can make some adjustments in our building code to allow manufactured homes in mobile home parks. There's some nuances to what is actually allowed by code in mobile home parks, and it has a different term. I can't recall it right now. So we've been working on getting some changes in the code that would allow those types of uses. And it has to do with whether or not they have foundations or whether mobile. A mobile home park basically is a building with wheels on it. Manufactured homes aren't, so we got to figure out how we work that. So
I think that is a wonderful project that you're discussing, and it triggers a thought in a conversation that I had this week with some folks around. Can that be applied to ADUs? Is there a way to apply what you're describing with respect to modular units replacing current mobile homes? But if we're thinking of how to explode or grow ADU opportunity, is there a way to look at how we can potentially use a framework of modular ADU in the marketplace? And so I think that would be an interesting question.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, ADUs are generally speaking, well, I shouldn't say generally speaking, they are accessory to a principal dwelling unit. So while we can certainly look at that and explore that possibility, ADUs are usually accessory. So
What does that mean? Accessory as opposed to what I'm describing? What's the distinction?
So and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're asking about whether or not an ADU can be located or replacing a mobile home or manufactured home in a mobile home park. Is that correct?
No.
Okay, my apologies.
What I heard was that there's potential work in code to allow different types of units to replace mobile homes, and those different types of units would otherwise be manufactured prefab units, right? And so thinking of the modular unit of the manufactured prefab as a replacement for mobile home, couldn't it be potentially extended that the manufactured prefab unit could also suffice as a ADU? Or are they currently allowed in ADUs? If I wanted to use a manufactured prefab as my ADU, am I allowed to do that today? Or can that be an extension of what you're investigating?
Understood.
How much further can we use the manufactured
Understood. Yeah. and
to replace housing or
Unfortunately,
add?
I don't have a great answer for you. However, we can certainly look at that.
Yeah, okay. I think you're tracking well. Right. Excellent. Great. And there was another question I think I had. You all sent an update to the value per acre map. Do you all want to just describe what
Planning is
that?
going to help us with that one.
Okay, great. Yes. What is that? Can you just give us an update on what that was?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Martinez. This is Brian Yell with Long Range Planning.
And just for members of the public, that is now publicly available on the CEDC's webpage from last meeting. I think it was updated to last meeting's agenda items.
Right. It should be. Yeah, we sent the materials to the clerk's office on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So the members of the CEDC had requested that the planning department update this visual that appears in the Our Downtown Code, which is a map from 2019 of taxable value per acre for Anchorage. It mainly focuses on the Anchorage Bowl, but you can see Chiviaki River in the distance, although it's so small you can't really discern any detail. We, unfortunately, were not able to locate with any certainty who created this map in 2019 or exactly what data they used. I spoke with Property Appraisal, our GIS department, as well as my staff, and we just unfortunately were not able to find who created it originally. That's not to say it is in any way wrong, it's just we were not able to confirm the source of the information. That being said, this new map that our GIS department has produced shows net taxable value per acre that is current with 2024 numbers, and net taxable value does take into account tax exemptions. So there were a number of tax exemptions that came online between 2019 and 2024 that apply to, I think, predominantly downtown, but there's also the factor of earthquake damaged properties that may have received some type of tax exemptions, or maybe their assessed value significantly dropped because they have not been yet rehabbed. So those are things to consider. But the main issue that we were unfortunately unable to determine is the maximum taxable value shown in the 2019 map is $82 million. The maximum net taxable value that we show in 2024 is $56 million. And that is a significant difference. And after checking with property appraisal, after checking with my staff, and after checking with GDIC, because we don't know exactly what information and what data was used to create the 2019 map, we have been unable to replicate data from 2019. So we are a bit confused as to why that changes there. So. But that maximum taxable value of $56 million, that is the, if anyone's curious, that's the ConocoPhillips building.
All right, thank you for that. Any questions yet? Member Brother?
Not a question, just, I remember the 2019 map was in the downtown plan, so I don't know who produced the data, but it says planning department at the time, so maybe it's former staff or something, but, yeah, so, and I don't have any insight on the discrepancy, but, yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. The graphic from 2019 was incorporated into the Our Downtown plan, but yeah, my staff and combing through our files, we were not able to locate the original mapping files.
Now that sounds like an interesting challenge. I think that's very substantially a challenge. When we want to be able to replicate, we want to be able to continue the continuity of knowledge and the things we are relying on. And so I don't envy the work that I think that you are realizing in that space, but I think it's important that you all at least have to identify something as a result of this. Just describe to me again, just for the sake of it, and I can see this map again, but for you, what does red mean? Like, what changes the value on this map? What are the things that affect, like, what would affect the value when I see net taxable value? Maybe I have just one question, and we can go offline with this. People ask about upzoning. What's an impact on that to this type of map? Like, does the zoning change the value of property on this type of map?
That's a great question. I can only speculate, and that's a great question for property appraisal, to see how that factors in their formula for assessing properties.
Right on. Well, that sounds like a great follow-up question that I hope that we are able to bring forward as next month or so, to come back with that. But because that is an interesting aspect of the current conversations that we're currently having with respect to zoning changes, the density, and then fundamentally, I don't know if we've had that answered about what are the changes to the values and the impact to people and taxes and whatnot. So thank you for bringing that information back to us and continuing that thread with us, and we'll take it to the next month as well. Great. Public Works, Lance, did you say you had updates on that?
I do, just a few things, I'll get you guys. Done a lot of project management engineering for the bond funded projects. The ones that just for coming on in the neighborhood. So Northern Lights Boulevard from Lake Otis to Burgaw, I think that one's going to get underway pretty quick. It's got a 90-day window to get done. 42nd Avenue, the design on 42nd Avenue just east of Lake Otis. That's going to include some work with AWU. That's going to be a 2-year project going from Lake Otis to Piper. And I think it goes and it's going to be in 2 pieces. And then we've been doing, for those of you who are familiar with the Coho lot, I know ACDA is, There's actually, it is the parking lot where the Saturday market is, typically downtown. Below that, on the hill, there is basically a, it manages drainage with natural vegetation, but the cleaning of the pipes that go from the parking lot down into that location are going to be getting cleaned out. So if you see some activity out there, we're basically cleaning that, and we'll be cleaning out where the basin is. Just, it takes a while for the vegetation to get established. So lots of construction work going on in project management and engineering. And then at maintenance and operations, probably the two big things I want to mention. They've been since our last meeting, they've been getting a lot of work and conversations with the pools. Mm-hmm. And thank you for the Assembly's support supporting getting some heaters replaced at the pools. And I think the thing I'll mention for you guys is the fleet. We are going to be asking. We've brought to the attention of the administration. The municipal fleet has a separate fleet fund. It is built into the budget. As part of that fund, we occasionally will tap into it to buy additional equipment. And you will see, I think it's about a $3.5, maybe a $3.7 million appropriation of fund balance from the fleet fund to buy snow removal equipment. And you will also see a part of that to go to support their operations for parts and non-labor activities, just things like that. So as you see that come to your desk, for those who are interested in the M&O side, if you have questions, please reach out to me or to Shay Troop, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. It will have a list of the equipment we plan to buy on the AM. So again, if you have questions, please let us know. But be on the lookout for it for the meeting on the 13th.
Thank you for the update on that.
And then in traffic, I think the two things I want to mention there, got a little bit of a late start on striping. Municipal streets, I think we've got all the crosswalks done. We're working on turn arrows. And then Mr. Coy and his team are continuing to track data as it relates to the two-way bike lane, in-lane bike lane on Fifth Avenue. So getting information and comments from users and departments. So I think as that pilot project wraps up in September, we'll have more information for not only this group, I suspect at your next transportation committee meeting. And if there's things going on in traffic or PM&E or M&O, let me know. So that's
Excellent.
about the public works right now.
Great. And we'll move on to, if there aren't any questions from members, we'll move on to real estate.
Good morning, Tiffany Briggs, Real Estate Director. One update is we did have our tax foreclosure sale. These were properties that were taken by the municipality for delinquent property taxes. Property taxes in most cases went back to 2019, but at the very least 2020. We sold all the properties, so those will be going back on the tax roll. And what that did was we collected roughly $269,000 in delinquent taxes for the city. We had 83 bids, which doesn't sound like a lot, but last year we had 15. So I think that some of it is the types of properties, but also, people looking for housing and to get it for maybe cheaper than they could on the normal market. So,
Just one of the follow-up to that. How many in the past you've described, or it has been described to us that last-minute folks would come in and save their property, but not necessarily catch up and make arrears, but just save it in the nick of time. Can you give us a sense of how that happened this time, or if not?
So we had 2 properties that redeemed fully the day before the sale, and then we had one previous owner who redeemed 15 minutes before the sale closed.
Excellent.
But all in all, we everyone caught up on their properties.
Excellent. Thank you for the update.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. All right, I saw Mr. Robbins in the house, so we would love to hear an update from the Anchorage Community Development Authority. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to update on a couple things we talked about at this meeting prior. We are waiting news on the EDA grant that we've applied for the ARNI program, which is the Vacant and Abandoned Property Program that we're working on. We're participating, hearing back sometime in mid-September about that. So that is still moving forward. I think we've also talked about the Nally RV Resort. It's just the RV resort down at 3rd and Ingra. Those project is still moving forward. We began an outreach program with our indigenous population, Tribe of Clutna and Heritage Land, the Heritage Center, to make sure that we are properly taking into account where the monument needs to be, so that we're serving their needs and making sure. But we're still very excited about it, because these adjustments we think are going to make the project more exciting and more interesting to potential campers. So that's moving forward, and we'll also starting sort of a redesign process on that to allocate and move the monument from the side to this sort of center focal piece of the project, which I think again is going to be really awesome. We also are going to be attending the U.S. Housing Conference again. We're going to be taking staff down to that in California. There's another one coming up here in about 45 days. And we have a DOT grant that we've begun to work on. We've hired a contractor through a term contract with AWU, and it is a grant to put in charging infrastructure around the municipality. And we have our kickoff meeting today for that at ACDA with the contractor there in town from out of state. So we're very excited about that as well. And our facade program is going well. We have about 16 projects in the works with the facade program. We're going to be meeting afterwards for the balloon project, working on that. Also we'll be we're preparing to introduce an ordinance for downtown parking changes. We're going to be giving the ability of those with disabilities to park anywhere they'd like it downtown, and not have to pay. So it's free disability parking for handicapped folks. And that ordinance is with legal today. Hopefully we'll go back and be ready to submit that right away, so that will be coming in front of you guys as well. That's about it.
Excellent. Member Brown?
Yeah, I have two questions. One is on that point. Well, first I'll say thank you for looking into that. I think we do want to make sure that people with disabilities can access the city easier. But what does come to mind, and maybe legal will flesh this out, I don't know if you guys have talked about it, is remember this came up last year on a different topic, hunting in Kincaid Park, which is that if you allow something for one class of folks, then it's an equal protection issue. So I just wonder, is this, maybe there's something different about parking, because I know we have, handicap spaces only, for example, but anyway, I don't know if you guys have talked about that, because I think the intent is not to then open it up to free parking to everyone, right?
Correct, yes, and we have actually, legal has actually already approved the concept.
Okay.
They're just now approving the ordinance itself.
Okay.
State law creates that ability to have handicap parking through their license plate program. And so we're just mirroring that for downtown and offering free parking. So
Okay.
that's a good question. We had the same question. We didn't want to create a special class or get into trouble with that. So.
Yeah, thanks. And then my other question briefly is, at some point you guys had talked about some tax incentive ideas for ADUs. I just wonder, one, if there's an update on that, and two, I know there's a lot of kind of discussion about incentives, so I wonder if there's a way to, kind of put your guys' ideas in the hopper as we look at this overall, or if you guys have a timeline for something you are introducing, or.
So we are hoping to join the legislative committee and start participating there so that we can help work on the incentives. We anticipate that the language that we had put in, which originally started as SB 77.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you. To clarify, it was property tax.
Property tax.
For ADUs, I think was
For
the.
ADUs.
Yeah,
just
so
that
yeah,
specific
separate.
question. Okay, I don't want to get off topic.
Yeah.
I'll let Jim talk about that. How about that? He's our ADU expert.
Yeah.
He wrote the last.
Yeah, so we proposed tax exemption for ADUs back in 2022 too. And unfortunately, the state assessor said we violated the rules there. So, well, once taxed, always taxed rule came into effect. And so what we can do is rewrite that ordinance so that if it's only a freestanding structure, then it can be tax exempt. So the home will never have a reduced tax. So we'd like to draft that up and see if we can gain support from the assembly for that.
Okay, yeah, and I guess, we can talk about it later, but I think my ask would be that there's a lot of these ideas floating around and all of them will have an impact on our overall tax base. And so I think rather than saying moving just one of them forward, I think my ask is really to, and I've talked to the administration about this too, like how do we kind of look at these and then look at them holistically and see which ones might move forward? Because again, we don't want to make one decision that it has a really big tax impact and then it doesn't leave room for any other incentive, right? So that's my general ask, is just to kind of put it in the hopper for some more analysis.
Yeah, the intent isn't to take anything away because everything is still going to be taxed the same. It's just that additional structure would be tax exempt for 10 years. And so you're not taking tax away from the base.
Great. Now, I think that, thank you for the explanation. I think the request is still to make sure that they're seeing things early on enough, because we're looking at both where to lean into with all our kind of attention, but also to Member Brawley's point, the kind of the overlapping nature of some of these things. And then also we're interested in other questions about layering stuff, right? And so it just matters to us to know kind of in advance. And I think that they're complementary actions. But thank you for the presentation and the update, Jim. Great. Mike, are you done?
Yeah.
Excellent. There's just one question I had. What is, when you mentioned DOT, the grant and charging infrastructure, can you tell us what that means? Charging for what?
EV cars, alternate fuel. We did a parking study, not this summer but last summer, and 22% of the 1,800 respondents said they were going to be buying a EV vehicle over the next 5 years. And so we'd like to encourage that, but it's a chicken-egg thing. You know, if you don't have the charging stations, you know, there's that fear of running out of fuel. So we're looking at getting a federal grant. There's some DOT money that's available, and looking at putting in a series of RV charging stations, or EV charging stations around the city. In addition, there'd be maybe some hydrogen as well, and establishing a network and putting in. We don't know the number yet. We're perfecting that information now, but you know, it could be 15 or it could be 40. We just don't know because we don't know the size of the grant.
Right on. And it sounds like there's a lot of work, and I don't want us to go into the weeds, but can you give us a sense of where the types of locations these would potentially go? Is it the case that ACEA owns property across the city that would be on your property, or would there be other types of arrangements?
They have to be publicly accessible. That's part of the requirement of the grant, so it would not necessarily be on just ACDA land, but we would certainly upgrade the one that we have downtown at the 6th Avenue garage, as well as put maybe some additional ones downtown, but then it would be part of the process we're going through the site selection. That's actually what the meeting is about today, is where would we put these, how would we put them?
Great.
So, and I would like to give you a more complete presentation as soon as we have begun some work that we can actually talk about. But right now, it's just a plan to go after the money. And so, but I will come back here over the next 2 months.
Excellent. Well, because it's hot, I'm going to follow up with one more question, sir.
Sure.
Which is there any relationship between this potential infrastructure and e-bikes, or the ability to charge along the way as well? E-bikes now have a new burst of fresh opportunity, and mobility is increased in our community because of actions that the Assembly has taken. So if it hasn't been, and it can't be, it may just be a consideration of follow-up investment opportunities.
Well, we have not talked specifically about e-bikes, but I'm going to answer that question today. I don't know if you can charge an e-bike at the same place you can charge an EV vehicle, actually, but I'll find out.
I would also highlight for you then to really go deep into the ordinance that we passed just this week, the e-bike update. We also created a new classification of shared micromobility program. So e-scooters are now allowed as well. And think about other communities where you have the Lime scooters, or in New York City, for example, you have the city bikes, and in other towns as well. Now you have that capacity for shared micromobility in code. So it just may be a consideration. Right on. Excellent. Good work. Thank you, Mike. All right, we'll move on to unfinished business. And I know Member Brawley's here. And so we'll just have this part of A. It's an update on Assembly Resolution 2024-201, the request of the 10-year targeted plan review. Member Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. And I don't have a whole lot of update, but, and I know this was on the agenda from last month's meeting. I mean, I think just to sum up the resolution, you all can look at it, but it requests a 10-year targeted plan review. That's something that's in Title 21. It's all referenced in the resolution. And the intent here was really to not do a full update, certainly not to write a new plan, not to do a comprehensive, let's look at every single strategy in the plan. I'm just speaking of legislative intent here. But really to focus on housing and, that those pieces that we know is a big priority, and to look at areas of our plan that maybe conflict, and I think when we say comprehensive plan, there's the 2020 plan, the 2040 plan, all of the district and other plans are part of that. So I know it could be a big task to look at all those, but I think at least us three sponsors, our intent was really to be focused, to use to the extent possible the data we already have, not to commission a lot more studies. There may be an argument to do, updated population projections. We have new numbers from the state, for example, but really more to look at kind of where there are strategies that maybe aren't going to achieve the goals. Maybe they're not quite the right approach that we've taken, or just, any kind of tweaking. And so we recommended a couple specific changes. Again, not because we can unilaterally change it, but just otherwise is a more open call to take a look at that. Again, look at all the work we've already done, engage with the public about that, and then I believe that the specific deadline in there was to request a work plan for what that would look like from the planning department, 60 days from June 25th. So I think so obviously that would be August 25th, more or less. And so I think that's really the question is just, I think, surfacing that, making sure that we're looking at that, and then also if there's other resources or adjustments that need to be made, because of course this is a resolution. So that's really the update I have.
I have a question. Is this just for folks to be able to track the different conversations that we're having? Last week, or last meeting, I think we got from planning a list of all of these district plans and types of plans and where they were in their different part of the process. Is that information related to this particular ordinance, or the action of bringing it all together and giving us a sense of what and where we actually have stuff?
Yeah, I think they're parallel. I mean, obviously this was kind of independent of that because it came out of the home initiative. But I think that they are related, certainly. And I think because I think there's a bigger project of what do we do with all of our district and neighborhood plans. The intent with this was not to try to answer that full question. It's really saying, are there things in our plans that are out of step with the strategies that we need to be pursuing to achieve the goals and get more housing? So I think they're related, but I suspect the full review of neighborhood and district plans is going to be outside of the scope or bigger than the scope of this.
Typically iceberg stuff.
Yeah, but I think we could take an initial look at all of these plans and see, are there areas where, like I said, where they're out of step, or where they really do say we want more housing, and so we can lean in on those strategies too.
Right. No, and I think it's an interesting notion that oftentimes things are often referred to in documents, but they necessarily may not even live or weren't completed, but there's referrals. And so getting to the bottom of kind of where things really are, both in terms of the values, but also the practicality of some of the plans that may or may not exist, I think is really important for us to be on the same page. Thank you, Member Brawley, and the co-sponsors for working on that.
What I guess, so then my question would be really to the planning department staff, where are you guys at with this, and what help are there things that the Assembly needs to do to facilitate this as well, knowing that we're not the ones doing the planning page?
Sure, this is Ryan Yell again. We are just in the final stages of putting together the work plan for the assembly, and we intend to have that forwarded to you this month. The big difficulty that we're running into is workload. Balancing our existing projects and those that are funded and are in the queue that we don't want to sacrifice those projects for another one. So we are struggling to determine where this all fits and how we're going to get all this work done in a timely manner. So just kind of as an example of when the Assembly allocated $200,000 for a Chugach-Eagle River Comprehensive Plan update earlier this year. We are requesting some additional funds from the state potentially to supplement that project, because $200,000, although it sounds like a lot of money, that is basically just a public involvement budget for a project of that magnitude. It wouldn't allow us to actually get that done correctly. We probably need double that amount of money. And just for comparison, the last 2006 Chugach-Eagle River Comp Plan update, that was done in-house by the planning department, and that was a 2-year effort that 2 full-time staff were solely working on that project for 2 years to complete that. So this is a hefty task, and we want to get this done. We need to get this done. We are due to get this done. We're just trying to figure out exactly where it's going to fit in with everything we've got going on right now, and whether or not additional funds may be needed to accomplish this, if we need to hire outside help.
Well, thank you, Member Brault. All right, and thank you for the update. Anything else on that, Member Brault?
Not for me.
Right on, great. But thank you for bringing that back to our attention, and again, kind of making sure that we're all keeping track of that. Under unfinished business, we had scheduled an update on abandoned properties, specifically the Assembly appropriated money last year with the Affordable Housing and Land Trust. And are they on the line with us? Now, I didn't expect that they would be, and primarily I hadn't been able to really wrangle them in with respect to the scheduling. So getting them on the agenda was aspirational, and now I have to go do the cowboy thing and wrangle them up, and hopefully we'll have that on the agenda for our next meeting. But on that note, I would give an update that in a few days we have a media day with the municipality on the blighted property takedown that we're going to be moving on in the next few weeks. And so, at least from the municipality's perspective, both with the foreclosures that we heard on an update, and then also with the sales, and then also moving on some of these blighted properties that we are taking on. That's good news, moving in the right direction to hopefully get some of these properties back into the right shape, but also create housing opportunities. And it really speaks into the work that ACDA, that we're hoping to get an update on for next month as well, and really go big with redeveloping some of the vacant and abandoned properties. So exciting stuff on that front, and I hope that we'll have an update from specifically the Affordable Housing and Land Trust at our next committee meeting. Moving forward to new business, I'm excited about this conversation, and folks know that the Federation of Community Councils has gone through some transition over the leadership over the last short period, but also from a vantage point of the Assembly's interaction and Assembly members' interaction with community councils and the way community councils interact with the public, these are really important questions, not only for the governance of our community, but for the economic and community development aspects, both how we work together to promote changes in our community, but also how we elicit suggestions and ideas and make them remain relevant. So I had an opportunity to meet with Ariana Belize, the executive director, and had the opportunity to invite her today. So Ariana, I'll turn the floor over to you to give us an FCC Federation of Community Council update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ariana Belize, and I am the executive director for the Federation of Community Councils. I am new to this position. I joined the Federation at the end of March. And I will say I don't have a background in community councils, but I think that is part of the reason I was hired, is because we don't have enough people in community councils who maybe have no experience in them. We don't have new people coming to the table. And so that is what I have been tasked with, is bringing new people to the table and also training the people who are at the table about how to interact with various departments, including planning and zoning, when it comes to when a community council has an interest, how can they work with these departments and get that work done. For reference, community councils are established neighborhood governance, essentially, in Anchorage. While they are not part of government, they create the conditions for citizens to channel their voices and participate in local issues. They're a bridge between citizens and local government, and their purpose is to afford the maximum community involvement and self-determination. Some of what we do is operational support. Right now we're helping Scenic Foothills through a challenge grant improve Baxter Bog, and Government Hill Community Council has been working quite diligently on improving the government commons, as well as, they're working on a bunch of different projects, and so they're using our fiscal sponsorship to get money into those projects. We also help with the CIP surveys, and I look forward to the August 16th work session on the issue, and working with the Assembly on improving that process and the administration. And then we also run the website and the email outreach, which is how a lot of public notices from the planning department and other departments get out. It's important to note that community councils are not the end of the conversation when it comes to local governance. It is important that they network with other organizations to create a diversity of opinion, because community councils are based in locations, but you have people working on issues or identity, and so all of those spaces need to be occupied, and all of those people can work together. So you can have somebody looking at a particular issue across all of Anchorage, and then you can have how that develops within a community council. So what the Federation is doing, this fall, we're providing training on just what is a community council. I would say if you know people who don't even understand what a community council is, in September we will be hosting our first training that will also be on Zoom and available afterwards. And I hope to just kind of lower the barrier to entry when it comes to community councils, to help people realize you don't have to go to every single meeting in order to participate in local governance. And if we can promote community councils as well, helping promote the boards and commissions that, you guys are trying to drive people towards, right? Is getting that community input. Part of my reason for coming here, thank you, Mr. Chairman, is also to talk about the work that is already being done by community councils that I think kind of gets lost in the paperwork and the email. And so in Q1 and Q2, I pulled up a number of resolutions that were passed by community councils in support of various projects going on through Anchorage. Birchwood passed a resolution in support of the Alaska Long Trail. Eagle River passed a resolution in support of the People Mover going to Eagle River. Government Hills passed a resolution in support of the Curling Club remaining in Government Hill. Fairview passed a resolution in support of the RV 3rd and Ingra Park. I believe also downtown had similar conversations, though I couldn't find the resolution. Midtown proposed a resolution in support of the Rain Garden in Cuddy Park, and Northeast passed a resolution in support of a fire safety road and a multi-use trail. So the work of trying to promote the voice of the people is happening, and hopefully we can continue to drive new voices into that as well, so we can continue to hear from a larger group of people as part of these resolutions.
Okay, we have questions? Member Braga has a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Ariane, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me the other day. And I thought of another thing, and when you mentioned getting new people into the councils, it made me wonder if you pondered a term limit of some of the officers. What I see when I travel around is, it's hard to step away because you've done so much for your community and you feel like you are the best person to keep at the position, but it does limit new people stepping in. Sometimes you just have to walk away to get that new person on board that brings fresh ideas to the councils.
Thank you.
Is that something that they would have to be a bylaws change or?
Yeah, thank you, Assemblymember Bronga. So the Federation is support, we're not regulatory. So we can't mandate changes. That comes through Assembly ordinance or just working with the community councils to promote bylaw changes. I would say some community councils do have term limits, some don't. And part of it is there is a reticence, I believe, in some councils for people to step down because there's nobody stepping up to the plate. And if nobody steps up, then the community council essentially no longer exists, even though it's recognized. So in order to keep the important work going, people stay longer than they want to a lot of times. That is why I want to really push on the outreach and the training, helping people realize that they don't have to have a background in political science in order to run a community council board or to participate in that process. But as far as actually setting term limits, I believe that would have to come, to mandate that would have to come out of Assembly ordinance and change to 240.
Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Member Bronga. I have a couple of questions from my members, colleagues want to get in the queue as well. Just following up along that lane, can you describe who's able to participate in the community council today?
Yeah.
Age range?
Yeah.
Just give us a sense of broadly. I know every community council may have specificity to their membership, but just broadly, what is the intent of community council participation?
Yeah, so community councils is anybody who, the soft language is anybody who lives, works, or plays in that specific area. Generally, it's anyone over the age of 18. You don't have to be a citizen. You don't have to own a home. You don't have to own a piece of property. So that can be somebody who lives in a community council. That can be somebody who has a business in that community council. It can also be nonprofit organizations. I did get a question from assembly members, from an assembly member, whether nonprofits could participate. And according to the sample bylaws listed in ordinance, nonprofits do get a voice in their local community council. Different bylaws may not reflect that, but that should get adjusted. When it comes to, people may not also know that they have membership across multiple councils. If they work in one area and live in another, they can attend both. So it's not, you could, in theory, be part of 4 or 5 councils, and that's totally okay. It's one person, one vote. So if you have 2 people living in a house, or a married couple, or a parent and a child living in a house together, as long as that child is over 18, that's 2 votes. A business or a nonprofit gets 1 vote. So even if you have 2 owners, they speak as 1 voice for that business or organization. But yeah, anybody who lives in Anchorage can participate. Anchorage, Eagle River, and Girdwood, I should say, from Eklutna to Portage.
Just remind again of the age.
Over 18 in the vast majority of them. There are some that have 16, and 16 is kind of various membership rights based on that age range.
Excellent. Any other follow-ups? Yes, Member Braun.
Yeah. Well, first, I appreciate all of your work. I know we've talked a lot about councils, and I've seen you out and about talking about councils, so that's great. Yeah, I know there's issues, but also just to acknowledge, they are independent, right? And then you guys, like you've said, your mission is to support. So I think, we all interact with councils a lot, and they're all over our code. But I just want to acknowledge that. I think one interesting thing as far as who can participate and kind of who's represented. I really like, and I know this is already in the membership, I like that, for example, it's not just homeowners or property owners. It's renters, it's anybody who lives in the boundaries and can demonstrate that if asked, where their address is. Plus the other, businesses and nonprofits and so on. But there's this interesting thing where there's the council where you physically live, right, your residency, and then there's the fact that you can be a member of multiple councils if you're a property owner. So I think what I've observed over the years is it's interesting because you'll see some folks show up at 3 or 4 different councils and really all put their full weight in on all of those. But a lot of times it's because they own rental property. So I'm not saying that's good or bad. I just think it's an interesting, because we always have property ownership and we always have residency as the categories. That there is potential for folks who own more land or more property to have a lot more influence. And again, I don't think the answer is only saying where you live, right? Because everybody has a stake in where they are, but I just want to note that. And then I think also the question is really what about the council structure could potentially change, given that they were designed 50 years ago, and there are some differences, right? When we've talked about this, more folks are on social media, people don't have time, and I know moving to Zoom, for example, a lot of people have given positive feedback. And I know you've thought about that as well. But I guess that's just kind of an open question, is how do we encourage councils to think that way? Because I know there's a lot of inertia, right? And we get in our own structures and all those things. So anyway, just ideas to put on the table or issues to think through. But yeah, looking forward to continue to work with you.
Absolutely, thank you. And just in response, you could own a business, and not outside of your rental properties, you could own 3 or 4 businesses in town and have a stake in various spaces, but it's definitely something to think about. I think one of the things as part of outreach that I want to do is target renters and target immigrant communities. There is this idea that people also have to have capacity in order to engage in government processes, and so that is something my organization can't solve, but my hope is to try and lower that barrier to entry, as I talked about, by making councils available via Zoom as much as possible, trying to help councils that aren't part of Zoom imagine what that would look like for them, to have a hybrid meeting, establishing best practices, and it can be quite a challenge to meet all the needs, but we're trying to support the best we can.
Thank you, excellent. And just to follow up along that, just following your description, do community councils at the individual level have the capacity to determine who's not able to participate? Do they have the capacity to exclude from the list of what we described as the broad category of participation? Right?
I'm just trying to think about the bylaws. I don't think you often see exclusionary language at this time used. I don't know if it is or isn't possible, but what we see right now generally is language that says membership includes A, B, and C. You don't see the words excluded often used. Not maybe that it couldn't happen, but I don't know how, with the categories of requirement set by the bylaws by the assembly ordinance being so broad, I don't know how we could exclude people. Even the ombudsman's office, determined that you don't have to be a citizen in order to participate. So I'm just trying to think of a scenario.
Oh, I'll give you a scenario.
Yeah, please.
Oh, yeah. Let me just describe one so that we can all hear it publicly. And it's interesting. I just wanted to put this on the record as well. Every community council, because they're place-based, essentially, they really have a diversity of range of issues related to their place. I'm a former president of a community council. I think many of us on the assembly are former officers or leaders of community council. But for example, Member Bronga and I both shared adjoining community councils, mine North Muldoon, and essentially Karen was the president of the South Muldoon Community Council, Scenic Foothills. Scenic Foothills' range of issues is very different than the Northeast Community Council, primarily because from an economic and community development perspective, which is why I invited you to the conversation today, we deal with more than just fundamental neighborhood quality of life. Because fundamentally, every community council has the opportunity to weigh in on capital improvement projects. So now we're crossing into a Rubicon of dollars spent in capital, but then also businesses in our community, liquor licenses, marijuana licenses that come through. The community councils can weigh objections. They can articulate those things. They have the capacity, if those things are coming into the community, to vet them, to weigh in on them. And so the Northeast Community Council, for example, has the Muldoon Business Corridor, so you have all of this type of action, let alone the neighborhood concerns of speed and walk safe routes to schools, neighborhood concerns. And I highlight that because there's really an opportunity for members of the community council to matter on economic and community development issues substantially. Having said that, I heard, and from my reading of it, if you play is not the appropriate one. So play is not a categorization of the ability to participate in the community council. If I ride the Moose Loop, I'm not going to vote in on everybody's community council that crosses the Moose Loop, right?
Yeah.
But if I work, live, or own something in an area in that substantial way, then I have the ability to participate, generally speaking, across all community councils, wherever they may be. All right. Work as a category distinct from business ownership. Is there a separation between work and the owner of a business? Because there isn't a distinction between the renter and the owner of a property. They all have a stake in the community. So a person who owns multiple businesses would have a stake potentially in multiple communities, but what about their workers?
No, Mr. Chairman, I see the difference, right? Like if I worked for Walmart in Midtown, would I be able to participate in the community council that business exists in as the non-owner and just employee? I don't believe so, but I would be curious what the ombudsman would say about that. When I say live, work, play, that comes from some of the original documents and like I said, the soft intention of membership as part of a community council. I'm gonna see him later today. I can definitely ask that question and see if he knows anything, especially because he has significant history in community councils as well and might know more than I do.
Yeah, let's definitely dig deep into that. I mean, this is an equity question, a substantial one with respect to a disproportionate amount of voice and weight in the political process. And I say that specifically because I have seen workers excluded specifically in the Northeast Community Council when I wasn't the president or the chair of the community council. Specifically on items where people would show up and say, we're voting on this item. The qualification has always been prove your residency with where you live or that you own something, right? Which seems fundamentally like special classifications that exclude on the straight face of equal protection and the rights of everybody. Especially if you have the ability to own multiple properties across the city and that gives you access to a vote at a community council level. It would seem that that is a clear violation of some equal equity questioning. So
interesting.
So I would definitely want us to pursue that with the ombudsman as well, because then that raises the question about the ages as well. And I know the ombudsman had an idea to work with community councils to lower the ages. Community councils, but the same discriminatory or exclusionary kind of framework potentially lives there as well. Young people don't necessarily have the ownership that adults can otherwise claim, right? And so that could be exclusionary from their voices.
Yeah, I definitely hear on that. Interestingly, I have never seen in my research at other, looking at community councils as they exist across the U.S., neighborhood associations, neighborhood councils. I believe this language is pretty common. Anchorage developed kind of the idea of community councils out of research and similar organizations that were popping up across the U.S. We didn't develop the idea in a bubble, and so I can't speak to like our workers
Yeah.
a protected class that need recognition in the same way that residents do. I haven't seen workers included in that language, but also I don't know every bylaw too. So I'd be curious if there are some bylaws across the municipality that do include language for that. So
A question for Mr. Gates, just to follow up on this. The Assembly, just for clarity, the Assembly basically has the capacity to regulate the community councils with respect to their interaction with government.
Yes, that's true.
What about membership of community councils?
Our code in chapter 240, it has a definition of membership, but it also refers to the community council's bylaws. So community council can, by adopting bylaws that define membership differently, I think they could do something that they're discussing about stuff for business in the community council's boundaries. I don't see prohibition, or I haven't really looked closely, but they can basically, the community council, by its membership, vote to amend their bylaws to do something like
exclusionary.
I think that's my, I guess.
See, I'm raising this question especially because for areas that have more commercial traffic versus residential, and I made that distinction, means business owners in commercial areas now have a vote in those areas, but they don't live in those areas necessarily.
Businesses, by the definitions we have, they don't use Ariana's and exclusionary language, but by when they define who can be a voting member.
To the affirmative.
In code, it does exclude people that don't meet the definition in general, which would be staff that don't own the business or own property or have a business license operate within the area of the borders. So, but as I mentioned, that definition in our code says, or as, unless otherwise provided by the council's bylaws. So, I think we could include them council by council. I don't know. I would have to do some research to see if we could amend our code to do that.
Well, I have a question for you. When was the last time the Assembly reviewed all of the bylaws of the community councils? We have often tension around members and community councils, but when was the last time there was actually a review to the level of the values of inclusion and participation where the city is today meets 50 years ago?
Well, I guess some years ago, we sort of delegated that duty to the ombudsman, and I'm not sure when he last did that. I think right now they're reviewing the council's boundaries. I don't know about reviewing the bylaws. Ariana, I know you have that as the ombudsman.
it was not recent, but not, I believe, decades and decades. I think it's in near memory, but I don't have a date for you. I would say once a community council passes a bylaw, it goes before the assembly for approval. So if a community council was to pass bylaw changes that use exclusionary language, the assembly in theory could deny that change.
Yeah, I don't think anything's come now, but I think things have come already. I think there's redlining in bylaws. I'm going to say that. I think that there's probably some areas that have created exclusion, and I've seen it happen at the expense of workers.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a challenge that is fundamentally being applied in practice. Member Braun?
Yeah, just really briefly, I'm having community council bylaws PTSD a little bit because I worked on the Spenard ones and then the Turnigan ones for probably a year, and then I got roped into anyway. So I do remember 10 years ago there were and I wasn't involved on the assembly side obviously. There were updates and there were things that were carved out of requirements like I think the officers, that was left to council completely of what that looks like. You just have to have officers. And then I know Spenard used to have mandatory dues, and so that was not allowed anymore, that you couldn't have dues. So, so there were some things like that I think were maybe not intended to be exclusionary, but could be exclusionary, and so there were things, and so I think in code, there are things that can be done, because I know things like that were done, but also there's a lot of deference, obviously, to the councils themselves. And the dues, for example, now you can collect voluntary dues, you just can't require dues, so. So anyway, just that was about 10 years ago.
No, I think it's a right time for this, and if there's any follow-up from an individual member, I think my committee wants to be part of the home of this conversation. And so I think it's really important because of the role that community councils play in helping community economic development in a broad sense. So they've all weighed in on the home, for example, home initiative, right? So there are these roles and their voice really matters. Excellent, great, thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, it's a fascinating question. If I could just weigh in for a second.
Yes,
I'm
please.
former Vice President.
Please identify yourself.
I'm Kirk Rose. I'm the CEO of Anchorage Community Land Trust. I'm the former Vice President of the Mountain View Community Council. I think also the nature of the business and what's allowed to vote is a fascinating instance here. So, for example, my company owns multiple properties in subsidiaries in a community. So you could imagine you would hold a property that you own in an LLC, for example. Does that LLC then, as a business holding entity in that community, have a vote? And you could have a company that is multiple properties around a community where a question of what that vote is, do they get one vote? Do they get one vote per LLC or subsidiary in some way? I think is unaddressed here. I think typically community councils have understood this as in the typical sense that you would as a community, like a business in a storefront in a neighborhood. And we all know business looks quite different today. And secondly, your point about workers is pretty fascinating. As a nonprofit, as a business owner, property owner in a community, we've been given one vote. But if my 15 staff came to that community council that night, they would not have a voice or vote. And you can see the rationale for that because a huge showing from a business could overwhelm the voting residents of the community. But also it is very fascinating to your point that you're taking away power from people who spend their lives working every day. Have important perspectives. So thank you for raising it.
Thank you for raising your vantage point as well. And it just highlights community councils, a lot of diversity of ideas. Mr. Linfield.
Yeah, Ariana, thanks for meeting with me. When we talked about our 6 community councils out there in the Chigiaki River area, the discussion was bringing new people to light. We bring it up again today. The problem we have is not necessarily getting people there, but getting people to serve. So when you have the September meeting, are you going to let the community councils know, or are we going to let everybody know? And then included in that, will you please let us know so we can be included in that training?
Absolutely. I'm working with the Assembly Legislative Services to promote our training. It's 3 parts. So September is talking about community councils and what they are. This October training is how to participate in a community council meeting because they are run by Robert's rules, and I'm intimidated by them, let alone I imagine anyone else. And the third one is training for board or potential board members, which is how to lead a meeting with a vision. And so yes, I absolutely will notice the assembly. The purpose of that is to notice it to as many people as possible, and thanks to the grant from the Ombudsman's office, I am trying to promote that in new and unique ways, rather than just because we can't afford a mailer to all of Anchorage, which would be my ultimate lovely goal. So trying to find cheaper ways to promote it, flyering, putting it in buses, Facebook ads, that kind of sort, to try and drive a new interested party, and also talking to community councils, telling them to invite their friends who maybe don't understand what they do once a month, every month, at a random meeting.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Excellent. Thank you. Cool. If there are, Karen, did you have a follow-up question? No, just comment on it. Cool. Right. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for your work. And I just wanted to take the time to also shout you out. You bring in a diversity of ideas, and I like the pipeline perspective that you're also seeing with respect to municipal boards and commissions. I think it's really an important opportunity for the hyper-local engagement to kind of be a stepping stone to broader participation. And most of us have also participated in boards and commissions along our journey as well. So thank you for that work and for being one of the folks that keep the hope keep the hope alive in our community. At this point, we're done with the overall agenda. I did want to just ask if there are any members of the public with us at this point on the Zoom or the Meet. Great. 2 items that I will just flag for us as we turn over to the other side of the page with our legislative budget priority items, just briefly. Item G, workforce recruitment and retention. You've heard that we are actively engaging in this comprehensive study right now, and Member Zelta mentioned that, so put a check next to that. And then also just to note that the under economic development item, the 3rd bullet, established the Anchorage Metropolitan Area Projects Program for sales tax with AEDC, was an agenda item that essentially was here prior to I inherited, and we kept maintaining this forward. I know they're having lots of conversations now with the Project Anchorage, and I have met with some of those folks, and I think a lot of that conversation is happening in the budget committee. But I'd be really interested in the nexus between projects, potential projects, and this committee and the expertise out of our staff folks, because the rubber meets the road with you all, and I'm sure that when it comes to potential projects and the minds of the public, there may be a big gap between the practicality of things, and I hope that we can work in that space as well with this initiative to help land the plane a little bit more grounded. Yes, Mr. Wilbur?
Mr. Chairman, I actually am engaged in this process. I had a meeting yesterday that AEDC has got a pretty thought out but a very aggressive schedule. And so one of the things that we talked about yesterday was they have a group of individuals from the industry about costing out the projects that are going to get selected. And so I'm very interested to see sort of how that's going to work, and also if someone comes up with a great idea, who actually is the client, and is the client willing to take on the new asset? So it's might be a good thing for somebody to want to build somebody for something, but who's going to receive it?
Right.
And the care and feeding of it. So, but I can tell you the individuals that were on the committee for costing, all in the industry, AGC, it's a good group of individuals that got volunteering to help them out. So, but so I'm aware of it. I'm very engaged.
Yeah. There's some very important questions. Just the practicality, and this is both an interesting and an aggressive project and timeline, and there's a lot of potential, a lot of capacity with this idea to go in different directions. So I'm glad that you have some of those rubber meets the road folks in the room, because I think that's important at this particular juncture as well, and it will be for my support. Are there any comments or any other follow-ups from any members that you want to just make sure we put on the record? Flag? Member Braun?
Yeah, just briefly, I see there's ACE Fund, and I know that's the Child Care and Early Education, and I know that was related to what Ms. Baldwin Day wanted to present. So I guess I'll just say, I don't know, we've moved through our process. The group's going to have their budget recommendations. It's going to go to that board when the board is seated. It's not now yet. But in the scenario that there isn't a board yet and we're into budget season, I guess I'll just say this could be one place to have those conversations. It could also just be a work session. So I don't know what that looks like, but just to offer, that's kind of where we are. And that's the plan B, of course. Hopefully the board would exist, right?
And we can certainly dedicate time at our next couple of meetings. Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that work.
Yeah.
And I'll just flag, I'm excited about our next meeting in September for folks. I believe ASD is going to be here with us, and it'll be their chief operating officer will come do a presentation on their real estate portfolio. I'm interested in the right sizing conversation that ASD is having publicly. I think it's the right time for them to have the right sizing conversation about their potential real estate portfolio, especially when some of their real estate holdings were being held with speculation of population growth and the expansion of schools at some point in the future. And Member Bronga and I know that we have one of those particular big old sites next to the Totem Theater on Muldoon, which in the past was part of a controversial relocation of the bus barn And so there have been some ideas with these areas, and I think it's the right time. I want to be explicit and transparent with ASD so they know why they're coming into this conversation. So I'm putting it on the record, and I'm also sharing this with them. But I just make that invitation to staff folks or any of the members. If there are any questions that you want me to make sure that they prepare for, send them to me in advance, and I'll make sure that I'm working with MJ, and we'll get them to the right people. Who's this? Oh,
Hi, I just wanted to do announcement, Chair.
please announce yourself.
Melinda Gant, ACDA.
Thank you.
September 17th at 5:30 p.m. at the Beacon Energy Center. The Midtown District Plan will have their second public meeting. So if you live, work, and play, this involves 3 community council areas, and that is Midtown, North Star, and Spadina.
Excellent. Member Braun?
Yep, since you mentioned that Totem Theater school lot, I don't know the process for approaching Totem Theater in general, but that space needs to be activated in a better way. And I know they own it, but the whole back side of Totem Theater is a paved, crumbling pavement lot where cars are chopped every night and drug deals happen continuously. And it's a prime lot for something else. And the theater's not cutting it. I don't know why they're staying in business, but it'd be nice to figure out if we can make that property be something that is positive for the neighborhood.
Yes, right on. Thank you. Just one note, I will shout out that my children have seen a couple of old reruns at that theater, and they seem to appreciate it. But I haven't been there.
$2 Tuesday was the best.
Right there. See, we have memories and recollection of neighborhood theater. Thank you, Member Bronca. Thank you, folks. We'll adjourn a couple minutes early today. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just want to remind everybody about the upcoming AEDC luncheon.
Oh, sure.
August 7th. If you want to, they're going to have a great speaker. It's going to be a great event. So I just want to remind everybody. We do have some tables and a couple of openings if anybody wants to do it.
All right, thank you. We're adjourned, everybody.